Ex-cons, what is the most ducked up thing about prison that nobody knows about? Con-employee relationships can be sneaky. When I was going through training to work in the prison system, I thought I'd never be caught dead doing favors or being friendly with an inmate. Eventually, after seeing the same inmate every day for months, cleaning your office, taking the trash, you realize they're human too. He wears a cross around his neck. He carries a bottle of adobo in his pocket for mealtime. He's active in church. He's a painter and loves pigeons. You find out his hobbies and bits about his life, and soon you see about getting him an extra blanket or a new pair of shoes, and you forget he stabbed his wife 9 times. Edit. Former prison librarian here. Dental care. Dentists won't fill your teeth. They will just pull them. No caps. No implants. Race. Prisons are still self-segregating in a lot of ways. When I worked in a prison in WV, one dorm had a black TV, controlled only by black inmates, and a white TV, controlled by only white inmates. Honor culture: if you call someone a name or steal from them, the other person must retaliate to save honor. As a result, you will see a lot of black eyes in prison. Postage stamps are a form of currency. Many prisons censor what books come into the institution. At one prison I worked in, The Art of War by Sun Tzu was banned simply because of the title. I assure you that no one in admin had ever read the book. A neighbor of mine was locked up for murder and released some time before I was born. It's one of those things where everyone knew about it but no one talked about it. I remember him telling me the story of why he was in there and what it was like. Very rarely did. And the most surprising thing in his experience was that the smaller, quieter, weaker, more vulnerable in general were typically left alone. It's only if you acted like a big shot did people want to fight you. Also, picking fights with said smaller, quieter, weaker, more vulnerable ones will instantly get you a non-stop flogging by other inmates until your spirit broke. My dad was in prison. In his situation, and in many others, you feel immense guilt after getting to know your fellow inmates. Because you're gonna get out. And they're not. Ever. Bombing. I had a friend go to prison for a drug-related crime. He had his own cell and stuck to himself for the most part. Another inmate tea into a water bottle and filled it to the brim with water and mixed it up into a slush. Said inmate then took the water bottle to my friend's cell, placed at the slit at the bottom of his cell door, and ducking stomped on it. Tea water sprayed absolutely everywhere. While my friend was in the cell too. It's never quiet. My friend's father worked in a prison. He had to quit because some co-workers neglected to give a woman her bipolar medication just so they could see what happens. I don't know if it's much of a secret, but they didn't give some women sanitary products, so the women had to free bleed and they'd get mad when their uniforms got stained. Lots of officers sleeping on the job. The most unlikely people are chess masters. Everyone was so goddamn friendly. I was mad when I got out and had to deal with real assholes again. I think it was the fact that we all knew we ducked up. And there wasn't any reason to act different or hid anything. Granted, Minnesota prisons are nowhere near the toughest. The smell. The smell. My friend who is in a correctional facility in Michigan says it smells like open ass 24/7. How bad it smells from the poor hygiene of inmates and unclean facilities. When you get out you miss the simplicity of choices. When you are in, all you think about is getting out and what you will do when that happens. Everything focuses around this. When you are out, at first, the input is enormous and a small part of you miss the simplicity. I work in an electronics store in a slightly sketchy part of town and often get customers who are fresh out of jail. Talking to them is like talking to a time traveler from the past. Some of these people are completely blown away by the concept of Wi-Fi. They are required to call their parole officers every day, but are not provided with a phone to do so. Explaining how phones and phone plans work to someone who has never even touched a cell phone in their life is surreal. The amount of choices available to them is certainly overwhelming. especially if they don't know how those choices will really affect them. I try to help them find the simplest solutions for what they need. When you get out, the feeling of a soft carpet on your bare feet is borderline orgasmic and you'll never take it for granted again. Not an ex-con, but former prison librarian. Inmates are not allowed to have intimate relations, including with themselves. They can get infractions for being caught masturbating. How shitty the toilets can be, especially when you have to share a cell or pod. Don't get sick. You'll probably die a horrible death. My brother is a CO, and he told us why their inmates have shampoo and soap that comes in packets now. They used to have it in little bottles. Well, the guys would use up all their soap, and instead of throwing the bottle away, they would keep it and fill it with a combination of whatever bodily fluids they felt was appropriate and use it to hold up other inmates for their commissary. Like, if you don't give me your commissary, I'm going to squirt this bottle in your face. And when they said no one got squirted in the face, they got pinky. My brother said a lot of people had pinky. Shitty was always one of the ingredients in the bottle. Edit. Since so many people keep asking, commissary is like a general store for prison jail. They have food items, toiletries, and other things. Although I don't know the specifics. Inmates get money in their commissary account either from their family or from whatever work they do, if that's a thing where they are. Also, I can't believe my most upvoted comment ever is about a shitty story my brother told me. Was listening to a podcast on the West Memphis 3 TL. DR3 dudes got life in prison for murdering a bunch of kids, but they were actually all innocent. One of the guys said the worst thing about prison was that during the summer, there was 1 million mosquitoes in his cell. The entire wall of his cell was red from the blood of all the dead mosquitoes he would slap and punch every day. They would be in his cell 24/7 just stinging him non-stop. While he slept. While he was taking a dump. While he was jerking off. It never ended. Most summer days he would just lay on the floor crying, wishing for death. I guess it's not really ducked up, but my dad said it drove him crazy when people wouldn't wear slippers in the showers, as without slippers it was one of the quickest ways to get nasty foot fungus. Guards can and will withhold medical treatment. When I was in county jail, there was an older woman vomiting profusely. She couldn't keep water down. Her skin was tinting and she was hallucinating. I explained all this to the guards and that she needed medical treatment immediately. For 2 days she was like that until I transferred out. I have no idea what happened to that woman and I still think about her. This was in Georgia, USA. Not in prison, but I volunteer in one. One time I was chatting up this huge black dude and I asked him what he did in his free time. He said he played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. I was shocked. On the outside he would never be mistaken for a D&D player. White guy on the other side of me told me that D&D was huge in prison. I had no idea. Also, same guy makes tacos for everyone else and makes money doing it. I think he has a hot plate in his cell and uses commissary items as ingredients. In PC the guys with really sick crimes compare them with one another. In fact, they don't necessarily get beat up because what they have done in the past. It's because they are bragging about it in the present. My sister is in prison and for me it's the access to the black market. Specifically, it's very easy to get hard drugs. Imagine sitting around with nothing to do, hating your situation, fighting depression and knowing you can just get some cheap heroin. Semicolon. They use money from canteen, relatives, favors, etc. It's also generally accepted that if someone gets in trouble, getting them out of it is just a matter of sending $50 to a random Western Union. Also applies if they want to be moved to a different cell. You never wake up feeling safe. Ever. There is so much hanging over your head that you may not be in control of that. The stress level is through the roof. My husband spent a little time in prison. He's been out now for 6 years. One thing I always found interesting is everything can be currency in prison. And I mean everything. From cigarettes to any extra food from commissary. Socks. Deodorant. There's an intricate trade system, and anything that's not your basic scrubs or what they give you walking in the door has a value. Not exactly a secret, but prisons make $$, $$ off commissary. Many PPL think the prison system purposely underfeeds its inmates so they are more compelled to buy off them. $1.50 for 75-cent pastries. Ramen packs for $1, prob. 33c per. $10 for $1 long johns. Etc. Etc. Also the insane costs for phone calls. Not me, but my mother. They had to put her in her own area because she was pregnant and people kept threatening the baby. It also happened that her cellmate was a woman who boiled her child alive and ate it. Which this happened before the woman went to jail. Not during the time she was incarcerated. Edit. I should have said in the beginning it was a county jail. Not big time prison. Edit 2. Spelling edit 3. Had to add in a time reference for the cannibal woman because some people don't know how to read properly. When they call you for court they wake you up at 2 AM and put you in a holding tank for another 6-8 hours. Shackle you up and take you to court to another holding tank waiting for your court time. After that, pretty much the same process. You'll be back in your cell around 5 to 6 PM. Me. Reading all the comments. The lifers are usually the nicest people you will meet while you are there. This is their home. This is their whole world. Most of them try to make it as pleasant for themselves as possible. Semicolon. Do not think for 1 second to mistake their kindness for weakness. They will duck you up. It may take a few years but they will eventually get right back to where they were in terms of privileges. Time means nothing to them. I didn't go to prison. But I went to jail. And what ducked me up the most is when it would rain or when they would cut the grass around the jail. We could smell the rain or the fresh cut grass through the vents. I laid there just wishing I could go mow the grass outside. I found that the worst part of being locked up is you are deprived of all of your senses. You taste horrible things. You smell horrible things. You feel horrible things. You hear horrible things. And see horrible things. All around it's a horrible place to be. And it's really hard to truly understand that unless you have been locked up. I have 2 friends who were in jail prison. Women also can get turned out or made into punks. And beat up by other women. Also, it was extremely easy for them to get any drug they wanted in prison but it would cost a lot more than it would outside of prison. I am not sure if these are really that ducked up or unknown. No. The COs. The case managers. Nor medical gives a duck if you're dying. Put in a sick call. Wait 2 weeks for an appointment with a nurse. Not a DR. They only give you 15 pads a month for a period. The pads are like thin cotton balls with a sheath wrapper and a sticky strip. Comma, and that's all you get after you have a baby also. Doesn't matter how bad you're bleeding. Whether you weren't there when they passed them out. Or if they got stolen. If you can't buy some at canteen. You're ducked. Oh, and sometimes they shut down canteen for weeks. So you're ducked anyway. Canteen is the store. I was just released November 2018 so I could go on and on about all the ducked up shit I seen and went through in my 2 years of being locked up in the largest women's prison in Oklahoma. Mabel Bassett Correctional Center is a ducking joke. Not a con, but recently learned something. Prisoners have to pay a bill for their incarceration after being released. Sometimes massive amounts of money that they obviously don't have, which just feeds back into the circle of getting arrested again. It didn't used to be a large percent of released people, but of course like everything it's gone up in recent years. Waking up in the morning and for a few seconds forgetting where you are. Then the sudden realization of where you are kicks in. It crushes your soul. Not me. My fiancé was in state prison for 2 years when he was 18-20. He worked in the kitchen and said all the meat labeled there was labeled not for human consumption. He told other inmates about it and he got kicked out of his kitchen job and put in the hole for telling people. The fact that literally every single aspect of the infrastructure is set up to be for profit. to exploit your family. From arrest quotas to plea deal quotas to the corporate-run phone system. The prison labor gimmick. Slave labor used to make products for company profit, not to better the community or help society. Prison is a business. A corrupt, criminal, awful business run by politicians and special interests that are more evil than the inmates. Honestly, there isn't any hidden truth about prison. Everything gets covered in the movies to one degree or another. Some of it's accurate and other parts are blown out of proportion, but the basic idea is displayed. The thing that most members of the public don't get is that it's a soul-crushing and dehumanizing experience that 99% of the time just makes people worse. Our prison systems, in the West, aren't about rehabilitation. They're about punishment and profit. They're about appearing tough on crime, etc. And what do people have to look forward to after they have paid their debt to society? Ongoing discrimination, social isolation, etc. Basic things like getting a job, applying for a rental property, getting utilities connected. There's a good reason why recidivism rates are at 80% or so, depending on how many years it takes to return. People get paid to gaze into the dark abyss that is your asshole. Got a few things. How childish full-grown adults act when you say no to them. They'll throw tantrums, make threats that are never followed through, smash cells up, cry, beg, demand, apologize, then walk on a wing acting like they're big and tough. The dangerous people are the quiet ones. Never underestimate anyone, especially small skinny guys. The smell of a lot of humans together in a small area is rancid. For a great podcast about prison life, readjusting, how they pass time, how they communicate and share boundaries, I would 100% recommend Ear Hustle. So well produced. Bitter's Eyes episodes. I binged them in about 10 days and the new series coincidentally starts today. K2. It's known as synthetic marijuana, but it's nothing like marijuana. When I worked in corrections, the inmates would find places to hide it. Since it dissolves in liquid, they would hide it in religious oils and wipe it on surfaces, like doorknobs. A priest and several officers got incredibly sick. One of my officer friends was checking on another officer who looked ill one day, sitting on the step to a building. Suddenly the guy jumps up and tries to fight him. My friend radios help and 4 officers hold him down as he keeps swinging. Suboxone is also tricky. Inmates and their families have learned to product dissolving strips of the drug and send it in the mail, behind stamps, in religious items, in glue on letters. I might be late and someone might have said this, but for the most part child predators get special treatment and are bunked with one another. If you even so much as make fun of them, it's a possible felony charge. So the idea we have of them getting beat up by the general population in prison is false. The guards and staff do not give a single shit about your safety. Had someone strangle me in front of staff and they did jack shit. That's not even the half of what someone could do and get away with it. Some people have nothing to lose. Ducking hell, I get the dress code thing a little, but that sounds like a good thing turning into hell. I think you wanted to reply to a comment above, mate. Officers run betting syndicates on how many written warnings and nickings they can give out, as well as extra points if they can purposefully cause fights and assaults by putting certain people in a cell together. That some guys will turn B and take turns taking and receiving, but when before they were locked up they were straight. I believe they call that gay for the stay. I went to a women's college and we had lots of girls who would dabble in the scissor arts while enrolled. We called them bugs. B until graduation. Read Life After Death by Damien Eccles. He was one of the West Memphis 3 that were wrongfully charged for murder. He was on death row for 10 years or so and goes through all of the brutal details of death row. Really eye-opening. Not a con, but someone I knew was. I don't know if this is where I live specific, but apparently they put medicine in their Kool-Aid to prevent them from getting hard to prevent RP. Not as ducked up as some of the other things here, but an interesting fact I learned. It's saltpeter, potassium nitrate, I've heard that too. But it may be just a myth. My uncle just went out from prison 8 years ago. His worst experience there was how the inmates make alcohol. The warden does not allow alcohol since it's forbidden. So what they do is they melt plastic, burn old rags and bedsheets, and add water to it. It tastes like tea, but it really makes them drunk. My uncle said that he can only drink 2 cups because his stomach would hurt. There are even reports of his cellmates dying after digesting that poison. Literally. Luckily, he's not one of them. He lived enough to tell the tale. He's now 68 years old. Semicolon. Side note. We're from an Asian country. All the electronics are made of clear plastic. My television. My beard trimmers. Headphones. MP3 players. Etc. Time stands still for most cons. I gave NY State 18 years straight. And I really expected to come back to the same time period at which I went in. Even though you have access to TVs, newspapers, etc. It's still like being frozen in a specific era. The lights are always on in your cell. Late to the show, but where I was there weren't any clocks anywhere. The only people that had the time were staff. If you weren't careful, you could easily lose track of daytime. I think that may be what bothered me the most. Thai prison, Bangkok. We ate out of the same bowls we washed our asses with. Lots of cockroaches. Lots of cats and kittens. Cholera positive. Eating ramen noodles dry. 93 people crammed in a room legally supposed to hold 55-60. Regular beatings by the guards. I could go on and on. The Gov regularly breaks the 5th Amendment by practicing cruel and unusual punishment. And the correction officers are never held accountable. Many of them are sadistic. From my former coworker. Me. Hey man. What was Christmas like in prison? Him. They give you red and green jello and turn the lights off an hour early. A lot of women are handcuffed to their birthing beds while giving birth. Not ex-con, but many people leave prison with a large amount of debt between paying for prison and related fines. Imagine getting out of prison with a get and no work history for years. Now you have to pay back a 10k loan. What do you mean paying for prison? Everyone is out to get you. If there's an advantage to be gained from you, people will attempt to exploit it. Sometimes it's mutually beneficial. Sometimes they're trying to pull themselves up by pulling you down. But the hardest thing to deal with is lack of outside contact. If you're not getting visits, phone calls, or letters, it is death. Those are your only escapes from the reality of being incarcerated. My family shut me out and I'm still extremely bitter about it. Anyone that was there and helped has cemented my loyalty to them for life. For a couple months after getting home, my girlfriend would catch me pissing in the corner of the room in the middle of the night. Sleepwalking. Probably because our bathroom was in our room. 3 feet from our bed. Also, when I'd dream while incarcerated, I'd have dreams of being free, in which I'd either freak out and wake up because I didn't wanna get in trouble for not doing my time, had a lot of backup time, or I'd not realize and wake up to a chow call. I'm a lawyer, not an ex-con, and this is in regards to jail, not prison. However, with all of that being said, this is something that is absolute bullshit and no one knows. And it seemed to me to be sufficiently on topic to be worthy of posting. You have to pay to be in jail. You heard that correctly. When you are sentenced to serve jail time, you get a bill for the time you were forced to be there. This creates scenarios where someone steals because they have no money, gets put in jail as a consequence, and now has even less money than they did beforehand. Further, due to the broken ass backward bail system that we have in this country, you can be innocent of a charge, unable to post bail, lose your job because of it, and then end up sitting in jail until you have a trial. On top of that, you'll then get a bill for all the time you sat. What utter bullshit.